Many thanks for staying tuned to Early Exchange. The conversation is on land documentation, titling policy, in which the Federal Minister of Housing and Urban Development is coming into partnership with World Bank to ensure that this process helps Nigeria unlock the wealth that can be gotten from the land that Nigeria doesn't really have the title that it should have for so many of such lands as we'll be talking, Femi. For the vast land, just less than 10% of them registered and having the legal titles that they should have. That's a far cry. But the aim is to get it up to 50% with this partnership that the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development is having with the World Bank. And so it would mean much, but how the process will be ensured is what we intend to look at today. Will people need to now re-register their land? Because like we've talked about, at some states or different areas, the process differs. So some of them have even gone through accreditation. I've heard several communities calling for verification of land papers over and over again. So would it mean that this process would be done all over for people to know where they stand, what titles their lands do not have? Of course, awareness campaign would be necessary.
You're quite right, because when it comes to the issue of land ownership in Nigeria, it's been of concern because you realize that most of the time the approach or the method to it is the fact that most of these lands are acquired informally, which you have a situation of whereby some of them are even inherited, maybe from their grandfathers, grandparents, or you have someone handing over these lands to a particular set of people, or you're acquiring them from a particular set of family. So as a result of that, the proper documentation and processing that should come into this kind of transaction is not usually done. Because we're in a global world where things have been standardized, and it's important that when you have this kind of transaction that has to do with land, the proper thing has to be done. And so it's important for people to have this understanding, which is why this conversation is crucial. Now, the collaboration between the World Bank and the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development is to ensure that they improve the process, whereby from 10% to 50% when it comes to land documentation and formalization. There is also this capital as well, which the World Bank will be providing. That's about $300 billion. But the concern on the part of World Bank is this capital cannot be accessed until you enforce the issue of formalization and the right documentation for this land ownership. World Bank doesn't want to get involved in things that are not being well organized, which is why it's important to formalize the process of documentation and tackling. And this is why this knowledge is important. When you acquire a land, even if, for instance, if I acquire a land from you now, and I like the fact that you're talking like a landowner, so you understand what is going on. So what is required is for me to make arrangements to get the right process and the right documentation so that I have the right documents to give me the validity to this land to prove of ownership. And they have, like about 6 or 7 of them or more than that, as far as Nigeria is concerned. The law, according to the Land Use Act, has vested the ownership of lands in the government. But whether you acquire it from the government, formally or informally, it's important that you have all this document, because the time will come where some issues will arise, whether legal issues as regards ownership. Something can change. Even you can have in law of contract, there's what we call consent. We can have consent now, and tomorrow I might decide to change my mind. But when you have a document written black and white to back up the transaction on the agreement, it's a way to make your case valid if any legal issue arises. So that's why in business or in any transaction, don't assume because the person is your father or you're inheriting the land from a particular family, you have
That's saying no brother in business.
Yeah.
No friend in business.
No, because everything has to be formalized. I usually find this situation where you presume maybe your father has handed over a land to you and you presume it's yours. Maybe your cousins or some other people
Have
will
interest
just have interest, and then years after, they are coming up with vested interest that, it's supposed to be a family now. Why are you claiming ownership? So that's why in that kind of arrangement, there should be proper contract, there should be proper arrangement, proper documentation. So this is very crucial in the sense that a lot of people underrate these things because they are very crucial. Now, people just think it's all about when you have access to the original receipt of the land, because you expected to be given a receipt by the person who is selling the land. But it goes beyond that. The most important is your C of O, which is a certificate of occupancy, to show that you're the right owner. It has in legal time, that's what you call weight. It's more weightier than when you just leave your documentation to just having deed of agreements or just having receipts. So it's important for people to know these documents and apply for them. Now, the challenge is when it comes to CFO is the bottleneck that that is around getting the CFO. I remember my friend had an experience that was years back. Even though it's been improved now, the process is being digitalized. If you need to apply for your CFO, it can take you years, sometimes five in the past, 5, 10 years, because the governor, you have to get the governor's assent, and then you have to submit the right papers, get the right documentation, and that can take years. But I'm happy with the fact that the Lagos state government now is creating a portal whereby you can drop those documents and it's easier for you to get these things done. So one of the challenges over the years that have also discouraged people in seeking for this document is the bottleneck that around it, where you have to do what we call human interface. You have to get to the ministry, submit some paper. At some point, you might have to tip or even discuss with some people. So the human interface is also creating bottleneck, which over time could, if you are not so determined to get this thing done, you might be discouraged. Now imagine you filed for something, you've submitted the right documentation, and to get the governor's assent or to get the documents taking you years, you might be discouraged and feel like, okay, maybe it's not necessary.
And
That's
within that space of time,
yes,
a lot
a
could
lot of
happen.
things could have
A lot of
happened.
things could happen. You could also not have the use of that land for some other purposes.
Exactly.
So it's really a setback, and we're hoping that this new initiative, which has been tagged Nigerian Livable Cities, will address that. And talking about cities being livable is not just to have the title, because the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development is saddled also with the responsibility of actually planning cities to know what parts of the city are residential areas, what parts of the city are commercial areas or industrial areas, as the case may be. So it's just beyond giving titles to land. It is a concern for the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, hence the move to partner with the World Bank to change this narrative. Now, what would this do for landowners when they have the proper title or the legal title that they should have? It means that they stand to benefit from capital that they could get from their land, as can be used as collateral. They could also get attract investment because of the assets that they have. And so the World Bank will be helping. It helps the World Bank as well to know what kind of development policies that they would be backing upon in cities across Nigeria. So we'll be joined shortly by a legal practitioner who is also a property lawyer to talk about the challenges that Nigerians encounter in trying to acquire legal titles for land in Nigeria. Femi, my partner on the show, has talked about some of the bottlenecks that's experienced while trying to secure a CFO for lands in Nigeria. Now, my concern, Femi, is this. The issue of the CFO, several state governments are doing what they can, doing their best to ensure that they change the narrative and more people are able to acquire that title for their lands. But I'm thinking, could the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development work in synergy with the states so that this is not just a thing left to different states to do? It becomes a national policy, and so it becomes very easy for people to acquire, maybe even cheaper. Though the fee that sometimes is charged for this may not be much, but I'm told that the processes, all the documents that you would need to even submit to get this sometimes can be rigorous to acquire.
In fact, exactly that's what this program intends to achieve with this kind of collaboration between the World Bank, and it's a way to standardize the process. And you know that we're in a digital age where technology is driving everything. So at this age, it is not so necessary for you to visit offices before you get things done, which is the norm, but it's not the standard. There's a difference between what is obtainable or what's the norm and what should be the international standard. Now that technology has made everything easier, now they're looking at that possibility. Lagos State government has started, and I can say that authoritatively because I witnessed that when it started. And even though there are some other issues that are coming up, but like you're trying to say that make it like a national policy, which is what this collaboration is going to address. It's important because the more your land is more valuable when you have the right documentation. Let's say you have a plot of land and all you have in your possession is just the receipt or the deed of agreement. The land could sell for 10 million, let's say per plot. But if you have the right documentation, once you have CFO, the value increases. You can, if anybody wants to buy, the rest assured that yes, this is a good buy because you have the right documentation. And that's why the awareness is there. That's why everybody is doing everything they can to ensure that they have the right documentation. But the bottleneck is still a challenge. What is the issue here as regards CFO? Because it requires the consent, the signature of someone or the governor's consent. And that's why this thing has to pass through a lot of processes. The documentation or the documents has to be checked to ensure that you're providing the right document with your survey, your receipt, your deed of agreement, every other document. But if this thing is manually done, it's going to take time because manually done in the sense that it will take a human being or someone in the office to sit down and start checking all those things, all this record. But if the input can be done technologically and then you have the output also creating a portal whereby people can also see, access the state where those things are. People can register, can even upload these documents. And once they upload these documents, it's easier for the guys at the back end to check the record and to ensure that if these records are real, the documents are authentic. And once this is done, you can log into your portal web as a person. You can track the process from the one that you submitted your documentation to see the state the processing is and to see when it's going to be formalized. By the time that is done, that gives the confidence that yes, someone is attending to these things. Unlike when everything is done manually and it's looking so opaque that you don't even understand if your documents are lost in transit, which usually happens sometimes where you make submission and then you come back and then they say, okay, they can't find the file.
So you have to repeat the process all over.
You have to repeat the process. And then also the element of corruption could also come in because where you have human being, there's tendency for elements of corruption. Even though we still have people who have integrity, we still have people who know their job. But when you have human interface in any process, it slows down the process. It brings bureaucracy, it brings bottleneck, whereby something that should take days might take years sometimes because of vested interest. There are people who feel that, okay, you need to, if I may use the slang, you need to settle me or you need to get things done for me before I get things done for you. You need to rub my palm or rub my back before I get this done. There's tendency for that to come into play. But when you drive it by technology, the human interface is reduced and make it easier. So, like you said, it's a necessity now because we're at a time whereby you don't have to do physical interaction to get things done. If I reside in Lagos and I have a property or I have a land in somewhere in Ogun State, I might not need to travel to Ogun State to get things done. But if there's a portal online or a website, I can get to upload the right documents and then do the necessary thing. It makes it easier. So this is why the bottleneck is, and a lot of Nigerians are always having this concern that when you have to wait for something, in cost of waiting, you can get discouraged.
And the cost of waiting too, some other titles have been the go-to for them. Exactly. And that has been like, okay, CFO, if you don't have that, you can have this. And there are also misconceptions about the title that your land needs to have. For some people, they will tell you, oh, you need to have the approval of the traditional ruler of that community where your land is located. Some will also say that once you buy land, then the first thing to do is to survey. Once you survey, then it cannot be disputed. The ownership of the land cannot be disputed. There are different narratives around, different people holding several opinions as to what document you should have. This is where I think that it is the responsibility of the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development to actually tell Nigerians what documents your land needs to have. Not everybody can go to a lawyer, a property lawyer, to ask, okay, what do I need to have in order for my land to be secure? Or at the point where they need to use that land to secure funds, that's when you're told by the bank that, oh, your land doesn't have the right documentation, the right title that it should have. It should be something that maybe is in public domain. That knowledge is out there. So when you want to acquire a land, it also informs what kind of land you should buy. because you ask for the right documents. Does the land have this? Does it have that? Unlike when people just buy it and then they begin to buy themselves, try to acquire the titles that the person who sold to them did not have, and it becomes a problem. It becomes expensive to even acquire, and that discourages some people from even buying land in certain areas. Well, the real estate companies now that have come in like trying to help with the situation, but it's not very easy for them too. They also suffer the bottleneck that is created around getting the C of O, but they manage because it's their business, and so maybe they're familiar with the terrain, and they have lawyers that also help them with all of these things. But it's an issue for those whose business it is to deal on lands, and it's also an issue for those who have gotten lands but cannot reap the full benefits that the land is supposed to give them because the titles that they should have for the land, they do not have it.
In fairness to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, I'm not trying to brief for them, but the truth is the information is out there. This has been spelled out as regards the right documentation or document.
If the information is out there as it should be,
where the
then why would
challenge is-
someone buy a property, maybe after a year or two, the same community is asking for verification, and then
That's
it's like a repeated process.
That's part of what I'm talking about. It's a combination of several issues. There are certain, human behavior that over time has been passed from one generation to the other, which brings about the issue of Omonile, who believes that they have the title to that land. Even if you acquire legally, they can still come back years after and say, okay, they are supposed to settle them. You're supposed to give them a percentage because, in fact, I remember I had an experience where I acquired a particular property, and after like few years, some people gathered together. They claim they've been in charge of that property before I bought it, and that they've been the one handling the issue of security, and not, taking care of the whole thing, not to allow people to trespass into it. So it led to several arguments until we had to bring in the traditional rule and some other thing. So these are part of the issues where some people just have that sense of entitlement. There are laws to take care of this. There are laws, but the challenge is who is going to take these guys head on? It is the responsibility of the government. And that's why it's important to make example of those people. We call them land grabbers or monile. It's becoming a phenomenon over the year, and they are constituting nuisance and disturbances to rightful landowners. It's a reality to live in a society. And as long as that exists, it's also part of the factors that, is creating that kind of environment for this kind of standard practice to thrive. So these people will just come, they group themselves together and then create a vested interest, and that you must pay them. And sometimes if you are not you don't have the right connection, you might not be able to deal with them. And so these are the part of the issues. Then another thing you must realize is it's also important for people to be educated. If you don't have the right knowledge, approach a lawyer or a real estate expert who can guide you as regards the right documentation. What people do most of the time is, once you have, let's say we're supposed to have a transaction between both of us, so I'm purchasing a land from you, I get a receipt from you to show that we've had what you call a contract or a transaction. Maybe I'm buying the land at the sum of 10 million naira stated in that receipt, or the receipt from the family or the original owner of the land. People have that. You now proceed to what you call deed of agreement, whereby we have an agreement between both of us that you are handing over that property to me. And you state there your name, your address, and you have witnesses where you have signature. Now, these are processes that people need to be very deliberate about it, because legal issues could arise. Anything could arise. Anybody can claim, okay, I didn't rightly give the land to the person in question. Anything can arise. Then when you do that, you also need to what you call have a survey, which is very crucial. The survey is very crucial. That gives you a picture of what the land is going to look like. And you must get approval, not just having the survey, you get the right approval. Some do it backdoor, to get the approval for it.
It seems like there are so many backdoor access to land ownership.
Well, it's also part of the realities in our society, which is why I talked about the use of technology. Where you have human interaction, there's always tendency for corruption or abuse. It is in every system. But it's also important to put in place what we call element of control. in management, there's what we call elements of control, where you presume people might abuse the law, might not want to obey the law, comply with standard. So you put in place element of control. So what is expected is for that kind of bad deed, there are people also who has the managerial responsibility to check these things to ensure that these things do not take place. But what you find most of the time is a situation where the person who is supposed to be the custodian of the law is now the one breaking the law, encouraging other people to break the law. That's usually the situation because of vested interest, because of corruption. So you discover most of these officials in this ministry, they are also, it's a public secret, even though if you don't want to mention names, but most of the time you find collaboration between some officials of this ministry and some of these people, even some of these are money, they know them. But because of their vested interest, you just discover they get these things done backdoor. But here is the issue. As a landowner, ensure that you get your documentation from the right source, because anything can arise in the future. You can have a legal battle. In fact, anything can. One of the reasons why it's important is, for instance, if you're acquiring a land from a residential area or a supposed residential area, and the place has been converted to an industrial area, issues can arise at that, because in urban planning, there are areas that are designated for industries, areas designated as residential. But you discover even religious houses are springing up in areas that are supposed to be residential areas. That's part of the abuse we're talking about. So it's for you to be ensured that you have the right ownership, and then if anything arises, you can be covered by the law. It is your responsibility as a presumed landowner to ensure that you get the right documentation so that you can be on the better side when issues arise, and then you have the right documentation. It's your responsibility to process it. Yes, it might take months, it might take years, but the value that it's going to bring to your authenticity of that land, it's something significant that you can't joke with. In fact, you can't attach it with kid gloves because it's something crucial in putting this documentation into place. I told you of the experience I had, and then the only thing that gave me validity over the land was the fact that the document in my possession. If I went ahead to apply for the CFO, don't ask me if I've gotten it or not.
I think I knew what the answer to that would be.
That's
But while I agree with you that it's a responsibility of the landowner to ensure that they get the titles of the land from the right source, sometimes
Don't
they do not
presume that
even
nothing
know
yeah.
the right source. But I think this is also a two-way traffic. It's the responsibility of the landowner. It's also the responsibility of the ministry to ensure the right things are being done. Because you find that when lands are acquired, there's no problem. Building starts to erect, there's no problem until the building is done and maybe operations have started. And then you find the ministry come up to mark the place like, oh, you're not supposed to have this structure here. You're not supposed to have this kind of business happening in this area. And the question is, from when it started, from when the land was acquired, when the titles or whatever document it has was gotten, and the building got to this level, where was the ministry?
Let me put an answer to that. What you usually find out most of the time is when they acquire the land, there's what we call lands that are under government acquisition, which means they are vested, the ownership of that land is vested in that of the government. Perhaps they want to use it for land ownership, which means even if those people are occupying those places for now, it means government has the power to reclaim that land, whether 90 years or 100 years after. So what you need to do is to go to the ministry and check if the land in question is not under government acquisition. That's what usually happens most of the time. Most people don't check. They acquire it, then they start building, and then when this comes up, the government comes with their own staff or with their own evidence to show that the land you've acquired is under government acquisition, which means even if it's not in use now,
currently,
in future,
in subsequent,
it can be, they are designated for certain reasons, which is the prerogative of the government to determine what it wants to do with, what they want to do with the land. So it's important as someone who wants to get the land to ensure that you confirm that particular, or the land is in question is not part of what lands that are designated as government designated area.
All right, that process of confirmation, we need to ask a lawyer if it's an easy process. We're joined virtually by I beg your pardon, by Victor Jibino, who is a legal practitioner and is also a property lawyer. Good morning, Jibino.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, Blessing. It's been a while,
It is.
isn't
It
it?
has really been a
Yes,
while. I'm sure you're okay and things are going smooth.
yes. Just that it's been a while I've visited your studio. I remember the last time I had an interview. It was also via Zoom, so but it's okay.
We
One of these
understand your
days,
busy
I'll
schedule
definitely.
as a lawyer. All right, before we bring you
Yes,
into the main conversation, Femi was actually talking about how it is the responsibility of the landowner, if you want to acquire land, to check from the ministry if that land is under the ownership or the control of the government at that time, so that you do not buy government property and years after you're told, hey, this was not even up for sale in the first place, maybe you've been defrauded. And so I'm asking, is it an easy process to even verify lands in Nigeria?
well, like I practice in Lagos, so when I'm making reference, of course, my reference would always be towards Lagos practice. So for getting verifying uh, a land before you purchase, whether you are a purchaser or if you are the owner of the land, verification of land in Lagos, it's not usually an easy process. It's not usually an easy process. It takes a lot of process. In fact, the process is very cumbersome and it takes a lot of time before you actually now get uh, the result of your land verification. Although the Lagos Ministry of Lands, that's responsible for matters that concerns lands in Lagos State, are doing pretty well compared to some other jurisdiction states. They've tried to digitalize the process of, trying to verify your land. When it comes with search, you can do electronic search. Even you don't even need to visit the Ministry of Lands physically. You can do your search by yourself online by just logging into the search portal, and you can just do your search within seconds. You get whatever information you are searching for, verification that you are doing. But when it comes to the issue of getting the titles and some other documentation with respect to land, that is where there is usually this bottlenecks. It can take as long as 1 year for you to get the C of O, for you to get a governor's consent, which is to me not encouraging for those who deal with lands for commercial basis. We understand the importance of your land having a C of O if you want to sell that land. The value at which you are going to sell that land, if that land has a C of O, of course, definitely more than the value that you are going to sell that land if it doesn't have C of O. So if you want to sell your land for the purpose of getting huge commercial benefits and you require a C of O to do that, if you need to get cashing on, you need to cash in money on very urgent for a very urgent purpose, and you need to sell your land with a C of O. You can imagine if your land doesn't have a C of O and you want to get that C of O, you'll be looking at spending over a year plus before you can eventually get that C of O to sell that land. So these are issues that needs to be addressed by the Ministry of Lands, states, Lagos State as it concerns us in our practice. So it's an issue that needs to be addressed urgently.
All right, Victor, good to see you again now. As a follow up to that, I would like you to shed more light on lands that are categorized to be under government acquisition. There have been controversies over this for years. You have people who have acquired this kind of land and they are in use for years, maybe 10, 50 years after. Then the government will take over. Talk to us. What are the issues around lands that are under government acquisition? What are the common practice here? And what is the standard or the provision of the law as regards lands that are under government acquisition?
I used to tell people by virtue of the provision of Section 1 of the Land Use Act, I tell people that all lands belongs to the state government. There is no exception. All lands belongs to the state government. Even lands that belongs to a particular family for over the years, the state government, if they require that land for the public benefit, can just come and take that land. Okay, so I always tell people that all lands belongs to the state government, irrespective of the nature of that land, irrespective of the nature of that land. So the issue of government acquisition of land doesn't necessarily have to come to play, because if you understand the principles that governs land, going by the provisions of the Land Use Act Section 1, particular of the Land Use Act, that says that all titles to land is vested in the state government. All titles to land is vested in the state government, meaning that all lands belongs to the state government, irrespective. So if you have been granted right of occupancy on a particular land, you should know that that right is valid for 99 years. So at the expiration of 99 years, it's either you apply for an extension of that 99 years, or the government comes and pick the land up. So because the land belongs to the state government, in reality, so that is the reason why it is usually advised, for you to be able to have some legal rights with respect to lands, you have to perfect your title. And when you are perfecting your title, like the other time when I was interviewed in your station, I talked about various kinds of titles that can give you legal rights. The certificate of occupancy is the most important. Then you have the governor's consent. For example, the certificate of occupancy, once you are issued certificate of occupancy, it means that you have legal rights to that land for 99 years. At this expiration of it, either you apply for an extension of it or the government takes it from you. So all land belongs to the state government, like I said. And if you have a genuine title, a legal title to that property, it means that the government has leased that property to you for 99 years, and the government has the right to recover the property for public use. That the only thing that you are just going to get is a compensation, for the compulsory acquisition of that land by the government. And the only way you will be entitled to such compensation is by showing the government that you have a valid title or a legal title to that land. Now, don't forget that those legal titles that you'll be presenting to the government to be able to get compensated was given out by the government. So, of course, the government will respect that and, compensate you adequately.
So the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development is collaborating with the World Bank to draft policy on increasing national land documentation and titling. The aim of this is to increase land formalization in Nigeria, which, according to the ministry, is less than 10%. What do you expect that this policy should state or be like in order to achieve this aim?
Well, it's a good step in the right direction, but I'm just looking at the fact that it is the federal government who is taking this responsibility upon itself, because, of course, except they want to dispute the fact that Section 1 of the Land Use Act says that the vesting authority or title on land belongs to the state government. This policy, I just hope that this policy will be drawn in line or carrying the state governments along, because of course, the state governments, the title belongs to the state. But it's a good step in the right direction. But what I want this policy to actually make up is, the first thing is the ease at, verifying the titles to a land is very, very important. The ease. What I mean, the ease, you don't have to go through the cumbersome stress and process of verifying land. There should be ease of verifying title to land. I like that the fact that Lagos is doing well in that area when it comes to electronic search of land, which can actually be done at the comfort of your home. So I want the policy to be drafted in a manner that people can actually verify title to land without, going through the cumbersome process of verifying titles to land. And also the issue of documentation, getting documentations, getting the certificate of occupancy should also be very should also be very not cumbersome. The ease at getting the certificate of occupancy should be seamless. And the timing within which you can get that certificate of occupancy should not be so long, like we usually experience in the Lagos states, as the case may be. Having to wait as long as 1-2 years, before getting your certificate of occupancy to your land, even going as far as dishing out some change to some officials who are in charge so that they can get this thing out on time. These are the things that usually discourages people from actually getting their title to their land. So I think the policy should also be drafted, putting it into consideration that the process of getting your title documents to land should be seamless and should not take too much time in doing that. Then if they want to expand, I think there should be an expansion of other forms of title documents to land. Like I usually say, I used to tell people that there's a difference, of course, distinguishing difference between title documents to land and land documents. Title documents, like I said, C of O, certificate of occupancy, succession, you have a judgment of the court, and etc. But then land documents, it's the document that is issued to you once you purchase a land. So land title is quite different from land documents. So when you're talking about land documents, you're talking about the document that will be issued to you once you purchase your land. And such documents include a receipt, a deed of assignment, a contract of sales, survey plan. These are called land documents and not necessarily title to land. They don't give you title to land, except for a deed of assignment at the perfection stage. When you perfect your deed of assignment, what you should be expecting to get as a result of the perfection of that deed of assignment is a governor's consent or a certificate of occupancy, whichever the case may be. Okay, so I don't know if the policy would expand, land documents to now become title documents to land in order to ease the pressure of people trying to get certificate of occupancy, since they know that certificate of occupancy is like the ultimate title that you can have on land. So I don't know if this policy is towards expanding what can be regarded as title documents to land. Probably these documents that we know as land document could be expanded. I don't know what is their intention. Probably these documents that we call land document could be expanded to the extent of becoming title documents to land. Okay, so as to ease the pressure that is usually on the certificate of occupancy being, like I quoted, the most lucrative form of title that you can have on a property.
All right, let's look at something quite significant to this issue of land processing, which is the activities of land grabbers, popularly known as monile. I'm aware that the Lagos tenancy law takes care of this, and that of the Ogun State and some other states, maybe as a replica of that. But why do you think it's been challenging to curtail the activities of these people in spite of the provision of the law, a section of the law that takes care of their activities?
Yes, of course. I'm very aware of Lagos State. That Lagos State actually has a bylaw or a subsidiary law that's against land grabbing. And of course, we know the intention of making the law. Of course, we have experienced the issue of land grabbers. If to the point of there are killings on lands and all. making it difficult for even people to purchase lands. So we understand the intention of the Lagos state government in coming up with that subsidiary law against land grabbing. But the issue, like I always say, it is not making the law. The main issue is on the enforcement. We have thousands of laws that has been enacted by the legislatures that is capable, to address so many issues and anomalies in this country. But like I always say, it is not making the law that is the bone of contentions. The bone of contention right now is the enforcement. That is where we have the issue. That is where we have the challenge. The enforcement of these laws. These laws are adequate enough to address a lot of issues and anomalies, that befalls us as a society. But the issue we usually have is the enforcement. We don't have that mechanism, that institution to be able to enforce this law. So that is where we have issue, the issue of enforcement. If we can be able to put our acts together and be able to address issue of law enforcement, then our laws are very much adequate to address any issue or anomalies that befalls us as a society.
All right, many thanks, Victor Jubino, who is a legal practitioner and specializes in property law, for being with us on Earth Exchange. We do hope the next time we have to talk with you, you'll be physically present in our studio.
Of course, that is if Jimmy does not give me shock absorber, calling me.
We understand
in the next
that.
1 hour. I will have an interview for you, Mr. Victor. It's okay.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.